Thank you. And I want to start by thanking the residents in the gallery tonight, many from Springfield itself, who are here to oppose the scheme. They're representative of the strength of local feeling. On the Council's website, there are 9 genuine residents who have made supportive comments about this application. There are now 529 objections. It's a ratio of nearly 60 to 1 against. And it's easy to explain because this council refused to allow Springfield to be overdeveloped. Following an appeal, outline permission was granted on the condition that the whole scheme was reduced to 839 units. That level has already been reached, and now Barratt wants more units than the planning inspectorate rejected. This application is 5 times larger than the outline permission for these plots, and it's 2 stories higher than the neighbouring buildings. It's developer greed with an NHS sticker slapped on top. Beyond hundreds of residents, the organisations objecting include the Wandsworth Society, who accuse the Trust of sleight of hand, the Friends of Streatham Cemetery, numerous environmental groups, and the Council's own Conservation Advisory Committee, who condemn the impact on the nearby park. You can add the GLA to that list. At stage 1, they said the application doesn't comply with the London plan, would result in harm, and that there must be a reduction in height and mass. The fact is that NHS capital funding is no excuse for overdevelopment. The Trust was already getting more out of Springfield than it could reasonably expect. Tonight's recommendation, therefore, to approve, points instead to the affordable housing. Now, the shared ownership units are unaffordable to the people this administration claims to support, which leaves just 95 social rent units, 21% of the total, which are offset by the loss of 37 units of staff accommodation. Apparently, that loss doesn't count in planning terms because it was conceded in 2012. Well, in that case, bring back the 2012 plans. Much as I understand this administration's desire for social rent and more social rent, this application isn't a good deal. And a bogus concession on the school site doesn't make it any better. That land won't be lost, and you can get the same outcome there independently. Tonight's application must be judged on its own merits. And it boils down to this. 95 units are not enough to justify a 5-story wall of howling that destroys what was agreed while permanently disfiguring the surroundings. It breaks the London plan. It breaks our local plan. It builds on municipal open land, which requires some fairly adventurous arguments about curtilage to be legal at all. It's completely inappropriate. And I don't even have time to talk about the access and transport issues associated. When my residents in John Hunter Way bought, they were told their properties were back onto some normal houses. And it's not just my residents. Your residents, Councillor White, on Hebden and Lingwell, are equally appalled at what will loom over them. And then there's the harm to the listed hospital buildings, a unique part of our borough's heritage. The developer's own expert said that plans along these lines would, and I quote, result in insurmountable harm to the landscape and the site's heritage assets. There's a reason this application has taken 15 months to get to this committee. You now have a choice. You can uphold past decisions and maintain the integrity of our planning system, or you can let developers get away with cynically pushing schemes to the limit and then coming back for more. This is half the size, again, of the existing development in a fraction of the space. Our residents deserve better. Our listed buildings deserve better. Our parks and open spaces deserve better. Greed with an NHS sticker is still greed. Please reject this scheme and tell Barratt to do better. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grant.
Just on the point about the quality of metropolitan open land and the quality of greenbelt, which we hear much about, where people say, oh, there's a part of the greenbelt that's got a garage on it and metropolitan open land that's been built on before and it's not of the highest quality. Actually, sometimes just because it's been left, even if it's apparently not of the highest quality, it can be particularly valuable because it's been untouched and is in a corner and has had nothing done to it in terms of the use by nature of that particular area. which was the point that Councillor Govinda was alluding to in terms of biodiversity. So, I mean, I do have some issues with the idea of building on any metropolitan open land, or indeed felling 50 trees, even if the application is then talking about restoring them. You can't.
When you look at the 4 blocks, the tallest of the blocks is at the highest point in the land and the closest to the listed building, and the lowest block is at the lowest point in the kind of fall of the land and away from the listed building. And you kind of wonder, would it logically not have been right to have the tall building in the hollow of the land so it doesn't sort of jut out? Would it not be right to have the lower building more in closer to the listed building so that it's more in terms of the heights complementary to the height rather than create this divide? And I just couldn't understand the design justification for it.
On page 45, the GLA says that the blocks need to be a storey lower. It actually sort of specifies it there, and particularly on the C blocks. So I was just sort of wondering any comments on that. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor, I just follow that up. And certainly we made throughout the whole process that a 4-storey development would be more policy compliant. So
Sorry? Can you speak up?
A 4-storey development would have been policy compliant. That's the angle we took throughout the whole process. So the applicants were aware of the fact that any 5-storey development would not be part of that process, and they would have to be something which would have to be weighed up in the balance of the planning application report.
The reality is that this is still not policy compliant at 5 stories, what we've ended up with. It still should be 4 stories.
I'm staggered. The number of... Yes, but look at, let me just say Swandon Way again. But,
Which the mayor made taller rather than smaller.
Yeah, I know,
exactly.
and I voted against that too. But we've expressed our views about this.
I mean, the site is, broadly speaking, pretty inaccessible. Paragraph 9.10, the PTEL, the public transport access level, ranges from 0 to 1A. And obviously, as everyone knows, it goes up to, the most accessible is 6A, 6B. I mean, so it's 0 in many parts of it. So I think we can expect, I don't think what it says here in paragraph 9.9, the minimal impact on the local highway network. People are going to have vans dropping off deliveries. There is no doubt about it. If you live here, it's a really long walk back from the shops if you want to do a big shop, notwithstanding, Tesco Local or Sainsbury's Extra or whatever they're all called. I think people will need to have places to drop off.
Given that this is quite an isolated location, what about things like deliveries and, postmen and all that sort of stuff? So the usual other supportive traffic movements.
Yeah, and I think it was Councillor Justin who mentioned Uber, and
yeah.
quite clearly this is a site where you might expect Uber, Amazon, etc., to be quite active. The assessment indicates that it anticipates there would be 62 two-way delivery journeys per day. I think. My view would be that seems small.
Yeah, but we're judging the application in front of us, and the application in front of us is de novo in that sense. It's got nothing to do with what may or may not have been there however long ago. It's de novo now about this particular site.
I accept the argument you make, but if, for example, community space was being lost because somebody had abandoned it, you would want in a new application for that community space to be re-provided. Now, I'm not making, in some ways, if another developer were to say that I've not been able to maintain it, that's why I got to knock it down, can you just let me get on with it? We wouldn't. It's a yes or no question, and Mr. Calder's answered it. I didn't particularly want to have a debate on
It's still de novo, and the NHS have just changed their procedures in terms of nursing accommodation. It is not.
We
now,
have taken the
I mean,
slack.
I take your point, but it's not actually relevant to this consideration.
But we've taken, as an housing authority, we have provided the housing.
Yeah.
Could I ask, was there any attempt to improve on the numbers of affordables? Because going along the lines of what Councillor Gavinia was saying, I mean, you know, we ended up with 839 in the previous planning, but that was cut down from 1,200. We've now gone back up, so you know, I think it's impossible not to take the whole thing as a whole. And if you take the whole thing as a whole, there's only 29% affordability here, and that's not really that good for such a big site.
It's not often. Is it a first? Councillor White and I are on a similar page on something to do with the housing. It's quite interesting. Even Councillor Graham, I think, raised the same point about the 95 social rent units we're going to get on this scheme. So is that a three-way first? It's got to be an amazing piece of history to start with.
I am feeling uncomfortable.
On the just so we know exactly what we're talking about, to clarify those numbers. So on the split of the mix with intermediate and social rent, could you remind me? It does say something, but I was just looking and I couldn't find it. The income requirements for the shared ownership units, please. Just so clarity, so we're and I know it's not just on this application, it's a general point, but yes, this does include households of up to £90,000 we're counting as affordable here, which the administration is obviously happy with because that's the deal they've done.
No, come on. well, with respect, we've all had arguments about affordability and its meaning, and both when you were chairing and when I'm chairing. I mean, we've all had that.
Just stating a fact.
Yeah,
it's not.
okay.
It's not a question of debate or principle, is it? It's just a statement of fact.
Now, I think we ought to accept this. If people are going to say no for whatever the reasons, and there clearly are, we need to have those reasons clearly stated, because this could be heard at appeal and it could be heard at the GLA. It's got to be clear and understood, and defensible reasons when considered by inspector. So, unless anyone moves the opposite and has definite amendments to the recommendations, I'm going to move that we accept the recommendations. So, is anyone going to... Councillor Humphreys.
Happy to move a refusal as an alternative.
Reasons?
I think we've got three key reasons here. It is that fundamental point of the encroachment on the metropolitan open land. We had an application, I remember recently, quite controversial one with the All England Club, where it was a point of principle about the metropolitan open land. I think we've got the same principle here. I know we've had council's advice about what they think, whether counts as metropolitan open land or not, but I still think there's a principle there that was defendable, that we're encroaching on metropolitan open land. We also have the point that it's contrary to our own policy, LP4, because it's taller than it is suggested it's supposed to be in our current new 2023 local plan, which says 4 stories, and this is 5 stories and more. And I also think we've got I need some help perhaps with phrasing this one, but I struggle with the credibility that this is manageable from a delivery and transport situation with the inaccessibility of a site with a PTAL rating of 0.
I'm being as democratic as I can, and that's a price, I can assure you. Right, those in favour of the amendment as moved by Councillor Govindia. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those against? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that's been. Therefore, the application has been refused, which I'm sure people in the public gallery will be really interested in. If you followed it all, it's been turned down and refused, and we move on.